This week we're going to be covering creating a new HTML page from scratch. So to create a new HTML page, you would create it much like how you'd create any sort of new file with Word or any other program you might be familiar with. You go to a blank page, go File, New for the blank page, File, Save As, and then all you'll have to do to make a new page is give it a name, such as testing, and give it the file type .html. You can either pick from the drop down here, or you can just write .html at the back, and it'll automatically save as that type. So there's a few important things to remember when you're naming pages. You want to keep the name as simple as possible. You should never use spaces, you should never use capitals, because when you're going to be doing links later, you need to match exactly how you name the page. And the more you put into it, the harder it is to match it, the more likely there is to be an error. So just don't use capitals, don't use spaces. You can never use symbols. If you were to use a number sign in your page name, it actually breaks the whole thing and stops working. So never do that. If you're just writing .html, nothing can ever come after that .html part. You need to make sure your file isn't being saved as something .html.txt, or it's not going to work properly. Now if you're using Replit, it's a little easier. You just go add file and give it a name here. We'll name it testing.html, which will give us a blank page on Replit. So last week we used a couple of tags in our checkpoint. This week we're going to look at them in a lot more detail. An HTML tag is a way of creating an instruction on a browser that tells it how to display something. The tag's made up of a few parts. You have your angle brackets, you have your open and close angle brackets here. You have the name of the tag, such as h3. It should always be written in lowercase. There should never be a space between the bracket and the first letter of the tag name. Most tags will have what's called a closing tag. That tells the instruction where to stop, and that's indicated with this slash here. Not every tag had a closing tag. You will remember the break tag we worked with last week didn't have a closing tag. But every tag needs to have an opening tag, or else the browser wouldn't ever know where to start. Tags can go within other tags, which is called nesting tags. And it's important if you start doing this that you're keeping track of what the order you open and close your tags in is. Because if it's like parentheses in math, if you mess up anywhere on your parentheses, you'll get an unpredictable result. It's the exact same thing with HTML. If your tags aren't open and closed in the right order, you sometimes get something you don't want. Some HTML tags, most HTML tags, will have things called attributes. An attribute is a way of providing the tag extra information to make it function in more specific ways. Attributes got to be written within the opening tag for them to work. They can appear in any order as long as they're after the tag name. So we can see here, for example, they're going to be written in the form name equals value, so the name of your attribute equals the value you're giving it, in quotation marks. Attributes can only work with tags that recognize them, so if you're trying to change attributes of an image, you can't change the font size of an image, for example. And attributes will only accept certain values, so you can't change the width of an image to a green, for example. And again, we have link as our opening tag, rel as an attribute, type as an attribute, ref as an attribute, and style sheet, text CSS, and default CSS as our values. We'll learn more about attributes next week, but it's important to be aware that they exist. So there are a lot of HTML tags, way too many to cover in one course. We've compiled a list of the very basic ones we think will be helpful for you to use in this class. I'm not going to read over it right now because that's something you could very easily do on your own without me reading. But the list is here if you like. And we do have a link to some more over here if you want more. But rather than read off what they do, we're going to have a look at what they do. So for this exercise, we created our page testing.html. Make sure if you're saving on your desktop, it's in your CS100 folder with the rest of your pages. We're going to try out some of our tags from above. So the first thing you always do when you're making a new HTML page is that you write the HTML tags themselves. The HTML tag tells your browser that you're going to be writing HTML code between this point and this point. So it's always the first tag you open and the last tag you close. We think of an HTML tag as an HTML page as being composed of two parts. We'll have a head at the top, right here, and we'll have a body below it. So just writing in order, we'll open and close a set of head tags like this. So we have the head tag. The head tag will contain all of the information for the page that's not specifically seen. And that's really hard to explain without an example, but luckily we do have an example here. The title tag is perhaps the most confusing tag in HTML. The reason I say it's confusing is because when you put a title, you expect the title to change something on the page. You expect it to make a title. But the title will actually change the tab name, which is actually this up here. So the title isn't actually changing your page, it's changing information about your page that's going to be visible elsewhere. So that's what the type of information that goes in your head tag. You can see there's also that link to the style sheet we were using before. Remember that the style sheet didn't actually show up on the page, it just affected what the page looked like. That's the type of thing that'll go in your head tag. So under your head, you would have your body. And again, you'll just open and close those and make some space. The body will contain everything that is being written on a website. So any of your writing, any of your images, any of your links, anything like that will go in the body. Last week we worked with a couple headers. We had worked with H3. We're going to try out H1 and H6. How the header tag works is the number will determine the size of the text, not the order. The order is determined by what order you write them onto the page. The number shows how large it's going to be. H1 is going to be the largest header, 1 is the largest, and H6 is going to be the smallest header. And then we had worked with paragraph again last week as well. We'll throw that in for a quick size comparison. So with all that said and done, rather than write this out, there's a copy button here. We'll click on that. We'll go to our new testing.html page. And we'll just paste it here. Now the problem with Replit is that when you run it, it only runs to your index page, and then you'd have to click the links to go to other pages. At the moment, we don't have this linked, and we're not going to learn how to link until next week. The way around that is that in the top right corner of our preview, there's a button that says Open in a New Tab. We'll click on that. In the address bar, we're going to write a path to that new page we want to look at. So we go / testing.html because that's what we named our page, which is why capitalization and all that is so important. This will have to match exactly how we named it. So we expected to get something that looks like this. This is what we got. We have our largest header here. We have our title as tab name. We have our smallest header here, and then we just have our paragraph here. And that's how you get started writing HTML.